So you have this tie of space and nuclear and deterrence enveloping both of them in the same way, which I would argue is not very good. Next slide. Forget that eye chart. I'm going to try to get, oh, an even worse eye chart, but I'll try to soften the blow for y'all. This is John Klein. He is who I would consider to be the second best space power theorist in the world, next to me, but he's got the slightly better book. And if you get to read Space Warfare by John Klein, he comes out with a second edition next month. I would highly recommend it. But he argues, based on Sir Julian Corbett's Navy theory, that the inherent value of space is the utility and access it provides, especially with information. But he argues that celestial lines of communication, which tie the ground and the space asset with its ability to transfer whatever is valuable in space, for the most part, information from satellites derived from space, is what the fundamental utility of space power is. And if you keep these celestial lines of communication, or clocks, he calls them, open, everyone has access to what they need from space. But the primary objective of space warfare, in his understanding, is to protect and defend one's own celestial lines of communication while limiting the ability of the enemy to use their own. Okay? And he also argues that command of space is basically the fight over these celestial lines of communication, the clocks. You want your access to space, you want to take your adversary's access to space away from them. Next slide. But what does that really mean? Well, it means that space warfare, if it's over the control of celestial lines of communication, it's similar almost entirely to the strategic understanding of sea warfare as a fight over sea lines of communication. It's a form of limited war. Why is that? Because it does not directly threaten a country's vital interior if you fight over celestial lines of communication. Now, things can get a little bit dicey if you strike terrestrial targets from orbit that might be located in a country's vital interior. But if you deal with the celestial lines of communication, you have something that's inherently limited and inherently not escalatory. You can decide to escalate, but it does not by itself drive escalatory behavior like the sanctuary school has argued for the last couple of decades. And I should be a little bit better with my terminology, but attacks in space, maybe not space warfare, happen all the time in terms of jamming, in terms of spoofing, and other things. And this has happened a lot. You've seen a couple of these space attacks by Russia into Ukraine and other Ukrainian space assets, and even European space assets in the very beginning of the Ukrainian war, yet that is not inherently escalatory. It is just something that we have to deal with as a concept in modern warfare. So if space power says, hey, because space power is an awful lot like sea power, and they're both forms of limited war, how do we actually deter in space? Well, next slide. I would argue that you have to look at how sea power was a deterrent before nuclear essentially took over the whole game of deterrence theory. And one of the big ones was the British Royal Navy in the 1800s. How was a little small island capable of asserting control over a very large portion of the globe? It's Navy and it's merchant marine. It's sea power. And British sea superiority entailed better ships, better people, better technology, better industrial base, better trading bases, more political support. It was a whole of government, whole of nation almost, advance on the sea that did it. It was extremely dynamic. They made sure to use the Navy at all times, although maybe not always use the Navy in large-scale warfare. Limited naval campaigns prevented large European wars for decades. There really wasn't an idea of stability in the sea domain, according to the British at this time. Deterrence was very, very active, not something that was supposed to be stationary in order to keep strategic stability. So next slide.